secondly, you've got to wonder about what note that speech struck. It sounded less like a concession. You wouldn't say that it was a victory speech by any means, but was it a speech of valediction, Stephen Smith? Was it a speech where he was justifying his return as leader of the Labor Party and trying to protect some kind of a legacy?
Well, I think it was somewhere between a valedictory and a vindication. In terms of a full valedictory, you've got to look at all of Kevin's period as Prime Minister. And in some respects, part of the judgment on that was the 2010 election. His contribution as Prime Minister, I think, will be the apology, which was, I think, a tremendous national moment, and then some of the work he did in international affairs, the UN Security Council, the G20, and working with Indonesia and Singapore for the expanded East Asia Summit. So as the dust settles, there'll be a chance to look back at that, but there's some significant achievements there. In terms of vindication, valedictory tonight, he's sensibly said that he won't be contesting the leadership of the Labor Party as we're now required to do under the caucus rules. That's a sensible thing. My own judgment remains that it's in his interest and in our interest for him to not just do that, but to leave the Parliament at some early time. We have to put a line underneath the politics of personality and the politics of personal division. And Julia Gillard was quite right when she rolled the dice back in June, saying that whoever loses this contest, this ALP leadership contest, needs to not just desist from further efforts or attempts at the leadership, but to leave the Parliament, which is what she's done quietly and with great dignity. If we're to give the next generation the chance, then we've got to essentially be able to say to them, look, the people who came in the early 90s, the people who are involved in Beazley, Crean, Latham, Rudd-Gillard, let us do an analysis for history. You now need to forget about that. Don't get involved in whose side were you on, Rudd's or Gillard's, what was your view? You've now got to strike out for the future. So for Bill Shorten, Tony Burke, Jason Clare, Chris Bowen, Tanya Plibersek, Mark Buckler, and the like, the ones who will now take the mantle of leadership in whatever formal capacity, they can't now get bogged down on who said what to who, or was it Rudd or was it Gillard's fault. They've just got to move on and not take a position which was you were on Rudd's side, you were on Gillard's side, they're on the Labor Party's side. Now, there's a chance here. We've got between 50 and 60 seats, probably between 55 and 60, so it is a good basis from which to work. Now, we know that there's only been one term federal government since the 1930s, and so it's always a big ask, but Beazley got close. Tony Abbott got close in his first go, so there's every incentive there for those of us who've had our time to say, you've now got a clean and a free run.
But part of Labor's problem in the last 15 years has been that there were so many members of Parliament who had the leadership baton, they thought, in their knapsack. And that was true through, in fact, at one point you were sort of seen as one of them, jockeying for position over those years.
I'm not sure my colleagues ever saw that.
But the bottom line is there were a lot of people then with leadership ambition. You've just laid out 5 or 6 who potentially have leadership ambition now. Is there not one clear option coming to the fore as the next leader of the Labor Party?
Well, in different circumstances, and possibly in these circumstances, some people may look to a very successful, safe pair of hands who captures the heart and soul of the Labor Party, in other words, my good mate Albo. Now, I don't know whether he wants to put his name forward, but he's had a very good campaign. He was a terrific leader of the House and a terrific transport and infrastructure minister. He may or may not want to put his name forward. Does
charisma matter anymore?
I think in some respects more so than ever in the modern media world, where, you know, not said critically, but superficiality becomes more and more into play. But look, there's no point doing all of the what ifs. But I've always been able to mount a pretty good argument that when Kim Beazley left the leadership, that was a mistake. He shouldn't have left the leadership when he did. When he came back to the leadership, I always thought that he would have won the 2007 election campaign. And if he'd won the 2007 election campaign, then the half a dozen of people who thought they might have had the knapsack would have had not just an opposition experience, but the experience of 4 or 5 or 6 years in government as ministers.
But that's a lot of what-ifs now.
It is a lot of what-ifs. But when I go through, if you like, the roll card of those cabinet ministers...
But isn't, just to cut through, because we want to get through a bit before Tony Abbott turns up, surely Labor now, as much as ever before, needs a strong, credible, stable leadership to emerge.
Absolutely.
It doesn't sound to me like that is there.
Well, let's just see...
Put it this way, not obvious.
Well, let's just see how things unfold. When I give you that list of people, they are people who could all, with credibility, either now or into the future, put their name forward for leadership. What you do know is that they're all good and capable cabinet ministers, and therefore can be good and capable shadow ministers, senior shadow ministers, and help grow the show again.
Okay.
Whichever one emerges, or which, for example, Jason Clare, I think he's a rare talent.
He's also very young.
It's too early for him.
Yep. I'm going to cut you off now.
Sure.
But Arthur Sinodinos, what were your observations what were your feelings, or what was going through your head as you were listening to Kevin Rudd?
Nothing had really changed with Kevin. That's what was going through my head. It reminded me of a concession speech by Billy Snedden in, I think, 74, when he said he didn't lose, we just didn't win enough seats. What I didn't hear was him taking responsibility for the fact that they have lost this election. Because the expectation was, when he came back to the leadership, not only that he could staunch the bleeding, but actually, because he was such a strong campaigner, we were told, he could actually get it back. Tonight was a decisive rejection of that thesis or theory. What also came through to me is that if that was his concession speech, imagine what his victory speech would have been like. And I think the problem with Kevin is he hasn't fundamentally changed, and that came through. I think Stephen is right. They've got to draw a line under all of this. I don't think at the moment there is someone there, and it's very early days, who looks like they're the next big Prime Minister.
If there was someone there who looked like that, they would have already gone to that person at some point in the last
Here's the other interesting thing, Arthur. Before Tony Abbott won Liberal leadership by 1 vote, who, including Tony Abbott, would have genuinely believed that he was going to be a Prime Minister?
No, I take your point, but you go back and look at Tony's whole career from early on. This was someone who had a lot of the raw talent that was needed to get there. With all respect to some of the Labor people now coming to the fore, I don't quite see another Whitlam in there. I don't see another Keating in there, or even a Hawke. But, you know, I mean, people can change over time. That's true.
For different reasons. I'm not sure we're ever going to see a Whitlam or a Keating again, particularly a Keating again. But just on Tony, we haven't seen, you know, as big an embrace of the Liberal Party as we thought. And so you can mount an argument that if you look how well Palmer has done, how well other sort of independent odds and sods have done, there hasn't been a mass evacuation of Labor primary votes straight onto the Liberal Party.
No, but equally, Kevin Rudd might have included in his thank yous Clive Palmer, bizarrely enough, because a lot of that Labor vote, a lot of the vote that deserted Labor on the primaries, because Labor's vote in Queensland, its primary vote, 30.5%.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that primary vote went to Clive Palmer, but didn't came back. So, in a sense, you could argue that Clive Palmer, if not helping to save Kevin Rudd's bacon, has at least helped to save his reputation to some degree.
Well, it certainly helped save Labor seats in Queensland.
It hasn't helped Kevin Rudd save his reputation then.
I didn't say that, Kevin.
It's all right.
It's outrageous that the ABC sometimes put words in your mouth.
Heaven forbid. I want to cross to Tony Jones now because he has Greg Combet, another of the many former Labor ministers who resigned at the time of Kevin Rudd's return as Prime Minister. Tony's with Greg Combet and Mitch Fifield.
Yeah, Greg Combet, we'll start with you. I mean, are you happy that Kevin Rudd has taken this decision to stand aside, and who do you believe should take the reins?
Well, first thing is, I think it's important that Kevin has made that announcement that he won't contest the leadership of the Labor Party. It's been a very divisive period, to state the obvious, and I agree with Stephen Smith that we now, in the Labor Party, need to draw a line under the Rudd-Gillard period, full stop. It'll be untenable for a new leader, as opposition leader in the Labor Party, to have Kevin Rudd there, and I think it'll detract from the capacity of a new team to take the show forward, and I'd endorse Stephen's remarks. It's a matter for Kevin, of course, to consider, but I think it's very important someone new comes into the opposition leadership with a team that focuses in a unified way on what Labor needs to do to rebuild. We've lost the election, and any election loss is a very difficult time. It takes a lot of rebuilding. As to the leadership issues there, and a lot of the names have been kicked around. Personally, I'd be certainly interested to know if Anthony Albanese is interested in the role, because he's tough, strong, experienced, Labor through and through. You know, a working class guy that's worked his way up to become Deputy Prime Minister. He won't waver. He'll have a strong view about important issues that are coming up, like carbon pricing, that'll have to be fought out in the trenches over the course of the coming period.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Tony Abbott is now heading to actually say what he wants to say as the new Prime Minister, something we haven't talked about.
Outrageous.
Leadership.
And Kerry will take.
And we're hearing that Tony Abbott has arrived at Liberal Party headquarters, and we're anticipating that he's going to appear, and there he is, to claim victory. Tony Abbott's career has been fascinating to watch develop. He first came to national prominence, in fact, as a leader of the movement to support a constitutional monarchy for Australia against the Republican movement, which was a successful campaign. He then went into to Parliament for the seat of Warringah on Sydney's North Shore, and in not too long a time, here he is standing on the podium about to claim victory for the Liberal Party, and in the process, the Prime Ministership of Australia.
My friends, thank you so much. I can inform you that the Government of Australia has changed for just the seventh time. You obviously enjoyed hearing it, so let me say it again. The Government of Australia has changed. For just the seventh time in 60 years, the Government of Australia has changed. The Coalition has won 13 seats clearly, with 10 seats still in play, and I can inform you that the Australian Labor Party's vote is at the lowest level in more than 100 years. So tonight, for the last time in this campaign, it is my honour to address you, the people of Australia. Mr Rudd has conceded defeat. He has been the Prime Minister of this country, not once but twice, so I acknowledge his service to the people of our nation. I now look forward to forming a government that is competent, that is trustworthy, and which purposefully and steadfastly and methodically sets about delivering on our commitments to you, the Australian people. Something very significant has happened today. Today, the people of Australia have declared that the right to govern this country does not belong to Mr Rudd, or to me, or to his party, or to ours, but it belongs to you, the people of Australia. It is the people of Australia who determine the government and the Prime Ministership of this country, and you will punish anyone who takes you for granted. And that's as it should be in a great democracy such as ours. So, my friends, in a week or so, the Governor-General will swear in a new government. A government that says what it means and means what it says. A government of no surprises and no excuses. A government that understands the limits of power as well as its potential. And a government that accepts that it will be judged more by its deeds than by its mere words. In 3 years' time, the carbon tax will be gone, the boats will be stopped, the budget will be on track for a believable surplus, and the roads of the 21st century will finally be well underway. And from today, I declare that Australia is under new management and that Australia is once more open for business. Today, hundreds of thousands of people would have voted for the Liberal and National parties for the first time in their lives. I give you all this assurance: we will not let you down. A good government is one that governs for all Australians, including those who haven't voted for it. A good government is one with a duty to help everyone to maximise his or her potential. Indigenous people, people with disabilities, and our forgotten families, as well as those who Menzies described as lifters, not leaners. We will not leave anyone behind. I want to thank my strong and united Liberal and National Party coalition team. I thank Julie Bishop, Warren Truss, Joe Hockey. I thank the members of the Shadow Cabinet. I thank my parliamentary team. I thank all our candidates, those who have succeeded and those who haven't, for the faith that you have placed in me. I thank the coalition premiers, all of them, who have stood shoulder to shoulder with their federal colleagues throughout this campaign. I thank the Liberal Party organisation, President Alan Stockdale and Federal Director Brian Loughnane, and yes, it's right that you should show such enthusiasm for Brian Loughnane, because he has run our most professional campaign ever. I thank my personal staff, led by Peter Credlin, who is the smartest and the fiercest political warrior I have ever worked with. I thank my family, who have given me so much and supported me throughout a public life. I thank the people of Warringah for returning me. I thank the people of Warringah for returning me as their Member of Parliament for the 8th successive time. But most of all, I thank you, the people of Australia, who have just given me the greatest honour and the heaviest responsibility that any Member of Parliament can have. I am both proud and humbled as I shoulder the duties of government. The time for campaigning has passed. The time for governing has arrived. I pledge myself to the service of our country. I have many friends in this audience. I say thank you to each one. We have been on a journey together, a long, long journey. May it continue, and may it help to bring better times to this great country of which we are all so very, very proud. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So, 19 years ago, Tony Abbott came into Parliament in a by-election for the seat of Warringah in Sydney. He was a minister in the Howard government for 9 years, cabinet minister for 7, opposition leader for 4. He is now Prime Minister, I think the 28th Prime Minister of Australia. And it will be very interesting to see what kind of stamp he puts on the Prime Ministership. 5 years ago, if you'd put to Tony Abbott that he was going to be a Prime Minister within 5 years, even though he might have nursed the ambition, he would have been as surprised as anyone to think of it as a reality, I would suggest. Arthur Sinodinos, would you agree?
Yeah, I agree with you. He said there that he's humble, and that is the truth. He was a great warrior under John Howard for a long time, and I think he saw the succession as being Costello and then possibly someone else, and maybe he might get a go. And he even joked at one stage in opposition about his people skills being an issue. But he did nurse the ambition. And what was interesting in 2009, I saw him the week before he became leader, and it was the night he was thinking about resigning from the front bench. Yeah. But what was interesting was he wasn't seeing this as a time to do this because suddenly his time had come. He was looking for a way to try and retrieve something from the smoking ruins of the party at the end of 2009. So what I'm saying is, I think a big streak of him may well be personal ambition. You have to have that to want to get to that job. But a big part of him also is he actually does have the party's interest at heart. And the way he's united the party and been disciplined since then has been, well, a great vindication for him in terms of the result tonight.
What do you think his biggest challenge will be in office?
I think the biggest challenge in office is, and I would say this, but
and I'm saying this particularly for Tony Abbott, not just for the next Liberal government, but for Tony Abbott as leader, in stamping his authority as leader.
I think he's got to, and I think he understands this, but he's now got to move to a situation where, as the Prime Minister, he's got the bully pulpit of the Prime Ministership, which he can use to, I suppose, direct or influence the national conversation. And that gives him a great platform from which to argue for change and to encourage change. Now, he said he's not going to break his promises. This is not about going back on promises, but he's got great communication abilities. He has a capacity, I think, to take people with him. As I said before, he's talking about having a big tent. Let's use this big tent to keep things going and keep change going, because the biggest challenge this economy faces is it's a pretty good economy. There are a number of headwinds and challenges, including the ageing of the population. The terms of trade is not moving through the way it was before. We have some big challenges to maintain our momentum, and that means our productivity and our competitiveness have got to keep improving, and you've got to take people on the journey.
What about his capacity to have other strong people around him? That is always one of the attributes I would have thought that's important to good leadership, that you're able to tolerate the advice of other strong people around you, even when they disagree with you.
Look, he's had strong people in his office. He alluded to Peter Credlin. I don't think he's afraid of strong people either within his office or people he can have an argument with, because he's sufficiently, I think, confident in his own abilities that he can withstand other people having a different point of view and he being prepared to argue it through. It's normally insecure leaders or people who sort of doubt themselves, who seem to want to cut off argument and not have people question them. I think he can deal with that. He can be pretty robust in giving it, and he can be robust in taking it.
Stephen Smith, what would you say are the challenges that will define whether and how he responds to them, whether Tony Abbott is going to be a successful Prime Minister?
Well, he's been very successful as an opposition leader and very successful as a political combatant. And he showed us what you need to do in terms of the raw politics of it, where he's got a divided party. He had a leadership contestant or person who was as equally interested in leadership as he was, Malcolm Turnbull. Malcolm's put his sword back in his scabbard, and you've got a united show. A complete contrast to our experience. I'm very pleased that Arthur has said what I think is from the most experienced Liberal who will sit round Tony's table in terms of previous government experience at the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff level. Very significant, he said, we get a good economy. That's very important because we haven't lost this election and Tony hasn't won because of our lack of policy or economic rigour. It's been our lack of political rigour. What will be the test for Tony? Can he translate his political discipline to government discipline, to administration discipline? He's been saying all of the right things, a gracious acceptance speech, and he said all the right things in his interviews overnight about the role now turns. It's always in the testing, not in the saying. But if he applies the same level of discipline and unity to government as he has to opposition, then he'll be hard for us to move on. But when you look at where we sit now, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the next Labor leader can run him very close at the next election.
And of course, Arthur, that'll depend to some degree on the makeup of the Senate and whether it's a Senate that is prepared to work with a Liberal agenda, or whether it's a Senate that Tony Abbott finds difficult to deal with, and that in turn could be a very serious test of his leadership.
If we have a series of minor parties which are either centrist or right of centre, that gives us a greater capacity to do deals than if it were the Greens holding the balance of power, in my view. Xenophon in South Australia is a very sensible character, and he is a real centrist, and he will influence others like John Madigan. We'll have to see what happens in Queensland. Hopefully.
And what about yourself?
Well, we'll see what happens with the third seat.
You've got the third Senate position for your side, and it's a bit shaky, isn't it?
It's a little bit shaky, but we'll see how we go. But I don't think we're going to see Pauline Hanson taking that seat, in my view. So,
might, if it works in an unlucky sense for you, and I wish you every piece of luck in the world, you might discover your Chief of Staff for the Prime Minister again.
No. You'll have a perfectly good Chief of Staff.
I think you've got every right to hold on.
Been there, done that. Time to move on.
Okay, well, we're getting close to the end of our coverage tonight, but I do want to cross to Tony Jones, who's standing by with Mitch Fifield and Greg Combet.
Yeah, Mitch Fifield, Tony Abbott was, clearly, I think it's fair to say, the most successful opposition leader we've ever seen. He saw off 3 Prime Ministers, one of them twice. What sort of Prime Minister is he going to be?
He will be an inclusive Prime Minister. He will consult with his team. He will rise above the position of being a tribal leader of the centre-right of Australian politics, which is something that I don't think Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard ever managed to do, was to cease being a tribal leader and do what John Howard did so successfully, to perceive themselves as the leader of the nation.
How do you think he will do that? Will it require some form of transformation in style? We heard Arthur Sinodina say he might even reach out to the union movement.
Look, I think Tony has been making that transformation. The transformation into the leader of the nation is a process that happens gradually, and it starts while you're still opposition leader. And I think Tony is there already, and we saw that tonight, that he sees himself as the leader of all Australians. And look, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he sat down and worked with the ACTU on a few issues. He's happy to work with anyone who can display goodwill and wants to achieve some good things for the nation.
Greg Combet, a night of national reconciliation. Do you think do you think Tony Abbott might actually reach out to people like you used to be in the union movement? And how will he be received, do you suppose? See Paul Howes inviting him out to dinner.
Unions. It's important unions work with any Prime Minister, and I used to work with Tony Abbott when he was the Industrial Relations Minister. We didn't get on that great, but we managed to cooperate. I think the biggest thing he's going to have in front of him is economic and fiscal reality. I mean, he said some ludicrous things. There's a budget emergency. It's all nonsense. All the carry on about debt and deficit. There are pressing issues on the fiscal front to deal with, but what a squib during the week when Joe Hockey announced a fiscal strategy for the Liberals after all that they had gone on about debt and deficit. The fact of the matter is, the economy is pretty strong by comparison internationally. Labor did manage it very effectively through the global financial crisis, and jobs have grown and the economy is still growing, unemployment's relatively low still. But there are economic headwinds there, as Arthur was saying.
In other words, for Tony Abbott Prime Minister, it's a pretty good position to be in.
It's a good
he could be Prime Minister for a very long time if he manages that well.
Yes, but his challenge is going to be to come to grips with the difficulties that we do have. As Arthur Sinodinos was pointing to, there's headwinds there that have to be dealt with, and Treasury's constantly revising revenues down. There'll be a lot of fiscal pressure and it will take some discipline, but I don't think we've seen a lot of policy substance from Tony Abbott to date, and other than some populist measures like the parental leave measure, which is the most absurd, unfair, inequitable piece of public policy I can remember.
All right, well, I'm going to bring Mitch in on that in a moment. First, we're actually also joined now by Green Senator Richard Di Natale. Thanks for being here. And obviously the Greens have done reasonably well. Do we know yet how, to win Melbourne, to retain a seat in the House of Representatives, do you know what the situation is in the Senate at this time?
Well, it's an incredible result in Melbourne to get a 10% swing to Adam Bandt. Turning that into what's a safe Green seat now is an amazing result, and congratulations to Adam and the team. That was an amazing campaign on the ground and shows when people elect somebody from the Greens who's going to be true to progressive values, climate change, refugees, decency, compassion, they like what they get. And
well, so the climate change issue is going to be critical with the makeup of the new Parliament, and especially with the Senate, because everyone has been asking the obvious question, will Tony Abbott be able to find a way through the Senate as it's constructed? What do you think? Do you have any idea?
It's a very interesting Senate. I know that the Greens will get someone from Victoria. Janet Rice will get elected in Victoria. She's, again, great candidate and do a great job. We're in the hunt in New South Wales with Kate Fairman. I think we're a real chance there of picking up another senator. So that's two new senators being added to the team. I think Scott Ludlam in WA will get re-elected. It's early to tell, but the strength of the Palmer vote and a few other preferences may go to Scott and get him over the line. I think in South Australia.
Are you seriously saying a Green senator might get over the line with the Palmer vote? There could be two more poll-opposed people or parties.
That's right. This is the interesting thing about the Senate contest. I think Sarah Hanson-Young is still a chance in South Australia. But what's happened in South Australia is the Xenophon vote has been so strong, he'll get two quotas. It looks like the Labor vote there's collapsed, and in fact Sarah and the second Labor candidate will be fighting it out. I think one of the interesting things in New South Wales is that the strength of the vote for the Liberal Democrats, which was essentially because people thought they were voting for the Liberal Party, may in fact mean that the Liberals don't get a third senator elected, and that's Arthur Sinodinos. His seat's...
Well, Arthur Sinodinos is sitting in the other studio, we know. So
his seat's in jeopardy.
Where's that analysis coming from? Is that Greens party analysis?
From the AEC, from a number of sources, from some of our psephologists back at party headquarters, and also I'm hearing it from some of the Labor and Liberal team as well. So it's going to be a very interesting Senate. We've got in Tasmania, the Greens are likely to get Peter Whish-Wilson re-elected, but there's a battle for the final spot there. The Palmer Party are in the hunt for that final spot, and in Queensland I think it's almost certain we'll see a Palmer Party candidate elected. So
let's hear from Mitch Fifield. This is, the story at the end of the day may be all about the Senate. We've got a clear majority, perhaps not as big a one as the coalition might have expected or hoped for in the House of Reps, but the Senate is, by that account at least, a bit of a mess.
Well, the Senate, in the ordinary course of events, is where the action is. It's been an aberration over the last 3 years that the House has had that focus because it's been a hung parliament. But
you must regret that you can't have a Prime Minister based in the Senate.
Well, We're never popular with our House colleagues, but they wouldn't understand that. But it was always mathematically impossible for the coalition to win control in the Senate. The best that we could hope for is that the Labor-Greens alliance would be denied control of the Senate. It looks like it's possible that there will be independents and minor parties who have the balance of power. We will work with whoever has the balance of power, obviously, but it would be much better if Labor and the Greens were denied that opportunity, and it looks like that may well be the case.
I'll come to Greg Combet. That's the mandate question, isn't it? Tony Abbott has said right through this campaign, this is a referendum on the carbon tax. In order to get it through, he's got to get it through the House and then the Senate. And now, if he can't do that, it sounds like we're headed for another election next year, a double dissolution election.
I'll look forward to it with interest. Just as an aside, of an important issue of note, Nova Peris has been elected to the Senate for the Northern Territory on the numbers I've seen, first Indigenous woman, so that's an important achievement, I think, and congratulations to her. But of course, carbon pricing, for which I had an important role in the Gillard government, will be a key issue to be fought out, and it's going to be a critical thing in the Senate, because putting all the politics aside, the issue itself demands the attention of the Australian government and the Australian people. And I think objectively we've put in place something that works, and I'd like people in the community just think about the issues, the facts. It's driving down emissions, what we're doing, renewable energy generation's up, it's working. Think about the facts in the course of the debate over the coming months, because if we continue with all this nonsense about politics, and Tony Abbott's been very successful in his political characterisation of what has been done, and put aside minority parliaments and Greens and Labor, we really have to deal with this issue, and it shouldn't be ducked. We're a relatively wealthy country, 12th largest economy in the world. We've got a responsibility, 15th biggest polluter, highest per capita emitter in the advanced economies.
I'm going to I see you're on a roll.
No, but this is a critical issue, and in the commentary, I invite you on Q&A, for example, get past some of the political garbage that has gone on and deal with the facts of what we've got on our plate here. It's a serious issue.
I'll take you quickly back to, and you have to be brief on this, to the Labor leadership. Is it possible that the Labor Party might elect a leader who says, we want to put that whole carbon tax thing behind us, let it go through, we don't want that on our back anymore?
Well, what would the Labor Party stand for? These are important questions now of policy and principle and values where Labor will define itself. And I'd personally be disappointed if that were the result. Of course, it'll be the discretion of the leader and the caucus, but I'd be surprised as well. I was mentioning that I was hopeful that Anthony Albanese might be interested in the role, but of course there are many others. I didn't get the opportunity to go on with that. There are many others there of great capacity, and I think they're all strong people. They know they're in for a fight. They've got to stand up to Tony Abbott and argue the issues out, and that's how ultimately you win back people's support. Articulate your values, build your policies on the basis of that, and argue it to the community and argue it in Parliament.
All right, so we've got to wrap up there and go back to the main studio and Kerry O'Brien.
And standing by in Melbourne from his seat of Maribyrnong, a safe Labor seat, is Bill Shorten, who is a senior Labor figure, as we all know, and a potential future leader of the Labor Party. He'll be talking with Annabelle Crabb.
Can't hear anything, sorry.
And we can go to Bill Shorten now, who's just being adjusted for sound quality. Do excuse us on that front. Bill Shorten, congratulations first on retaining your seat of Maribyrnong.
Sorry.
No, we're not really getting through to him there.
Oh,
well, we'll give it a few more seconds, but if it's not going to work, we'll move on. I think while we wait to see if Bill Shorten's going to be there, because he may, I mean, tonight is probably not the night where any potential candidate for the leadership is going to put their hand up. What we might do now is I'm told he's back. Annabelle, let's have one more crack at talking to Bill Shorten.
Hello, Bill Shorten. You're joining us from Maribyrnong. We've been talking to you and you've been unable to hear us, but we're with you now. So congratulations on retaining your seat, first of all.
Yes, and thank you to the voters of Maribyrnong for giving me the privilege to continue to represent them, and thank you to all my supporters for campaigning hard for me.
Look, there's a couple of big questions for you tonight, I guess, and I'll put them quickly given the lateness of the hour. First of all, what does the result tonight mean to you vis-a-vis the decision that you made 9 weeks ago to throw your support behind a change of leadership at the top of the Labor Party and the government?
It was a very difficult decision then. I believe that the minority government under Julia Gillard had achieved much, but I believe then, and I still believe now, that Kevin Rudd was the person who would make Labor most competitive, and I believe that tonight's results, as incredibly disappointing as they are, Kevin Rudd certainly put Labor in the best probable position that we could have obtained.
Did your expectations of the result change over the course of the evening?
Yes, if you follow some of the reports late in the week, it seemed like Labor was in for a fearful drubbing. Whilst good MPs have lost their seats, whilst the coalition's been successful in persuading some people to change their votes, the Labor Party, with its back to the wall, I believe has done reasonably well, but obviously understanding that the aim of Labor should always be to try and win a majority of votes.
We heard the Prime Minister speak this evening. It sounded like a speech of vindication in parts, and of course crucially at the last part of that speech he did vacate the leadership of the Australian Labor Party. Now your name is one that crops up almost immediately when people are casting around for potential future leadership personalities. Is that something to which you are prepared to commit at this stage?
No, tonight is a night of reflection. Let's recognise that the coalition has won the election. Let's recognise that Kevin Rudd, I believe, put Labor in a very good competitive result. And there's a lesson for the Labor Party, one of which has been articulated by a range of its leaders, which is that if we look divided, people will not vote for us. Another lesson from tonight has been that Labor shouldn't repeat the mistake of 1996 and throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to junking and disowning some of the great things that we have got done in recent years. And I think tonight's about reflecting and respecting in an Australian democracy that the people have spoken, so I certainly won't be adding to leadership speculation tonight.
The people have also spoken pretty clearly on the issue of carbon pricing, haven't they, Bill Shorten? And given the result, do you think, personally, that the Labor Party should be insisting on its carbon pricing regime in the Senate?
Well, millions of Australians did vote for the Labor Party, and I'm grateful for them. Thousands of volunteers went out and campaigned for Labor. People in trade unions, people in small businesses, people everywhere campaigned for Labor. People expect Labor to say what it means and mean what it says. Labor's made it clear that we will not pass on to the next generation the problem of tackling carbon pollution without us putting a price on it. We are not a movement, we are not a group of ideas, we are not people who will simply put off to tomorrow issues which should be dealt with today. So I believe that Labor has a mandate from its supporters to be true to its values, and I know, along with all of the other Labor members of the Parliamentary Party, that we will commit to making sure that we make Australia a better country for our next generation, and one of those challenges is to put a price on carbon pollution.
Bill Shorten, the last 6 years, the first Labor government of which you've been a part, have been an extraordinary ride in so many ways. How will history recall the competition between these two characters, Gillard and Rudd?
They will recognise that both were significant and remarkable leaders who accomplished things. Just as we associate Chifley Homes and Whitlam Education and Keating Superannuation and Hawke and Kelty workplace deals, we will say that Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan guided us through the global financial crisis. We will say that Julia Gillard, with her team, helped implement better schools and a national disability insurance scheme. I believe that over time, history will judge our performance, perhaps better than it's judged at the moment, but it will also say that a divided Labor Party will find it incredibly difficult to command a majority of votes from the Australian people, and that's another lesson of today.
Is it true to say, as Simon Crean has observed this week, that the rivalry between those two, that division between them, has actually escorted Labor from power in effect?
I hate to disappoint some of the headline writers for tomorrow, but I'm not going to engage in recriminations. We've had a remarkable thing today. We've had a democratic election. Thousands of people in big towns and little towns all over Australia have queued up in a peaceful and orderly manner, and we've seen a transition of government. This is not the norm across our world that we live in. I respect the fact that the Coalition's won the election, but I believe that what people want from the Labor Party now is for its next generation to make sure that we are united, that we have our arguments, we argue our policies, but that the electorate know that when you see Labor, you see one team with a vision for Australia, which is all about jobs and education and healthcare and a fair go all round. People want unity from us, and it's up to us in opposition to re-win the trust of a majority of Australians and to keep our faith with the millions of people who did vote for us today.
Can you think of a time when you'll be prepared to make some sort of remark about your eligibility for the leadership of the ALP? Are we talking days?
I know that the Labor Party will regroup, but we've also got to be humble. We must recognise that the people have spoken. We must recognise that some people who used to vote for us did not vote for us at this election. Our focus needs to be on making sure that we are clearly and demonstrably listening to people, that we are committed to working together, that we're committed to being true to our values, and indeed, what I would say to those millions of Australians who did vote for Labor, please get involved with the Labor Party. The quality of our politics is always enhanced when you, the people, take an active role, and in the Labor Party, we are keen to open our doors and make sure that we are the sort of organisation with the values which have kept us strong for a long time, but will be strong for the equally long time into the future.
Bill Shorten, thanks for joining us tonight.
Good evening. Thanks for your coverage tonight. Cheers.
We're going to do one last look at what's happened around the nation and have a look at the trends behind these raw figures. With 70% of the vote counted across Australia, it breaks down in two-party preferred terms to Labor 46.5% of the vote, Coalition 53.5%. That is a swing to the Coalition broadly across the nation of 3.6%. Clearly, somewhere between 15 and more seats have changed hands tonight, and I'll go to Joe O'Brien just to give you a sense of how those figures have broken down.
Thanks, Kerry. So Tony Abbott is Australia's new Prime Minister, and there'll be a coalition government. The exact size of the coalition majority is still being sorted out. We heard in Tony Abbott's victory speech there he said 10 seats were still in play. We're saying about only 5 seats at this stage. So Labor has 54 seats guaranteed. That's a loss of 15 seats. We're saying the coalition has won 88 seats at this stage. That's a gain of 17. We're saying Adam Bandt is picking up the seat of Melbourne, and 2 of the other party members have gained their seats, including Andrew Wilkie in Denison. The ALP primary vote is at 33.3%, the Coalition at 45.5%, the Greens at 8.7%, and others at 12.5%. So how does that translate when you compare it to the 2010 result? The Labor vote is down 4.6%. The Coalition up 1.8% at this stage. The Greens vote is down 3%, and the others up 5.9%. So how does that look on the floor of the House if we take a look then at what will be happening in Parliament when it resumes after this election? So we're saying 88 Coalition members in the House, a pretty healthy majority there in the House, and we can expect that they'll pick up a few more than that. And on the other side of the House, we're saying the Labor Party at 54 at this stage. And as I said, there are still seats in play, so that number could increase slightly. You can see the green guy way up the back there if your eyesight is good. And then we'll go to the prediction now, and this won't be significantly different from what we've seen. It's only those extra 5 seats. But we're saying at the end of this, the 44th Parliament could look something like this. The ALP at 55 seats. The Coalition at 91, Greens, Adam Bandt picking up 1, and 3 other members of the House, including Andrew Wilkie in Denison. That's it from me for now. Back to you, Kerry, in the election studio.
And we're going to go to Anthony Green now, just to continue the look at these trends and how they break down from the primary vote into seats.
Yeah, I just want to run through a couple of things about the primary vote. That's the lowest Labor primary vote since the Second World War across the nation. In New South Wales, the Labor Party vote is 34.5. That's the lowest vote since the war in New South Wales. In Victoria, it's 34.8, the lowest since the Second World War. In Queensland, it's 29.9, the lowest since the Second World War. And in Tasmania, 34.6, the lowest since the Second World War. Now, we filled that chamber in, and to some extent, we've had a lot of commentary, I mean, I've been doing it as well, saying that this wasn't quite the result, the defeat we expected, and that's certainly the case. But the coalition has still had a substantial victory, and we've got 91 as the current prediction. And on those numbers, there's a 60... The number we got up there was 69% counter. That's quite low. There's a lot of pre-polls and stuff to come. So the coalition may yet pick up a couple of extra seats, and that majority may look like a bit of the landslide that some people were expecting. But certainly the two-party preferred by the end of the night looks like it'll be 53%, which is at what some of the polls were predicting. It's not 54, and certainly it's not the result where Labor was less than 50 seats, which was some of the polls were suggesting, or some of the, actually, to be honest, some of the interpretation of the polls. Now, the one other thing I wanted to say briefly was just about the Senate. It will be an unfolding story over the next day or two. I think Arthur Sinodinos is been elected in New South Wales, the third senator for the coalition, but he's had a real scare because the Liberal Democrats have polled 9%. The reason they polled 9% is because they had column A on the ballot paper, and people have confused them with the Liberal Party. So that's an extraordinary result. But in Victoria, there's a third party potentially elected at this stage. In both Tasmania and Queensland at this stage, the Labor Party has lost the Liberals have lost a seat to Palmer's United Party in Tasmania, and Glenn Lazarus will be elected as the final seat in Queensland at a seat at the expense of Labor. Nick Xenophon's got a quota. Family First could elect a quota in South Australia. The figures there are not nearly as advanced. So in other words, the Labor and the Greens have lost control of the Senate. They can't block government legislation as of the 1st of July next year. But if people thought there were a lot of lobbyists going to the lower house in the last term of Parliament, the disparate collection of people in the crossbenches will make the Senate very, very difficult to control in the next Parliament, and brings forward the question about reform of the electoral system.
Okay, now let's just take up on that point, Arthur Sinodinos, and that is that the new Senate, of course, doesn't kick in until July next year. Right. So Prime Minister Abbott will have to deal with the minority vote in the Senate on paper. He'll be dealing with the Greens as the...
Well, in the spirit of the big tent, he'll be saying to the Labor Party, look, you've had a loss. Do what we did in 2007. We accepted the verdict of the people. We passed or waved through the removal of work choices and its replacement by the Fair Work Act. We'd be saying to the Greens, you believe in paid parental leave along the lines of what we've identified. Let's sit down and talk about that. But I think Tony would be... The carbon tax is going to sit there, isn't it? Well, look, the Labor Party have to make up their minds about this, but if they look like they're thumbing their noses at the Australian people, when it's clear that, you know, there is now a majority Conservative government that wants to get rid of the carbon tax, and the carbon tax is the single biggest issue that wrecked Julia Gillard's career, I think they have to think about it very clearly. They have to show the public they're listening. Politics, you have to show you're listening by your actions, not just your words. So your last word on tonight's outcome? Well, I hope Anthony is right on the Senate, speaking from self-interest. Particularly on yourself. What I would say about the outcome tonight is that if we take a broader view, leave aside partisan politics, it's actually not a bad thing to have a government kept on its toes by an opposition of critical mass. I've never subscribed in this theory of you just wipe all your opponents out, because that just makes them go to the hills, they become guerrillas, and they become even tougher, meaner in the future. I think it's better for government in Australia if there is serious opposition. We provided that serious opposition to a point where we became the government. It's now Labor's turn to provide that accountability and transparency where we're concerned. Stephen Smith, your last word on, and as part of your last word, I'm very conscious of the fact that that circumstances denied us the opportunity to take a proper look at Western Australian seats. So, as part of your last word, please feel free to very briefly give us a sense of the seats that were in play in Western Australia. Well, the seats that were in play in Perth, Fremantle and Perth, we've held comfortably 55, 56% two-party preferred. Brand, we've had a 1 or 2% swing against us, so Gary Gray will hold. So the 3 seats that we held have been returned to Labor. It'll take a bit of time to work out the various machinations of Liberal versus National Party in O'Connor and Durack, but it's pretty much an as-predicted outcome by me. Gary Gray was always the thinnest strand, but he's got back. Okay. More generally, Arthur's analysis is right. It does help governments and
the community if there's a strong opposition. We've now landed somewhere between the 1996 result and the 2004 result. You've got a group of...
Which was better than you expected when you walked in here tonight.
Absolutely. We've got between 50 and 60 members in the House, and a good basis for a strong opposition and a range of people to choose from for an opposition leader. So we've done much better than I thought we would. Having said that, you know, we always obviously shed a tear at the loss of a Labor government, and when the dust settles, a Labor government that didn't do the politics anywhere near as well as it did the policy and the economy. And the reality is we will rue the fact that we should have been knocking on the door for a third term, not scrambling for a second term.
Okay, at this point in the night, I'll say thank you to the two of you for your terrific contribution to understanding what was taking place tonight. Stephen Smith, good luck in a future outside of politics. Arthur Sinodinos, good luck with the with the final Senate vote over the next couple of days. But thank you both very much for participating.
The worst that'll happen is he'll be a cabinet minister till the end of June next year.
We'll see.
Okay, we're now going to have our traditional call of the board, where we run through every seat in the country very briefly, so that every one of you will know what's taken place in your electorate. And we're going to have Annabelle and Anthony take us through that.
Yes, it is that time of the night, call of the board, so refresh your beverages and let's begin. We start in the electorate of Adelaide, held by Kate Ellis, to whom we spoke earlier. She is a departing minister now, but still the member for Adelaide. Anthony?
She's been easily re-elected with 43% of the vote, a swing of about 5% against her after the distribution of preferences. And in Aston, in South Australia, Alan Tudge, who was elected for the first time at the last election, he's been easily re-elected. His marginal seat, he's gained a 7% swing to him in that electorate, so an easy return for Alan Tudge. Where Ballarat, in central West Victoria, Catherine King, who was a recently appointed minister, she's had a 6.2% swing against her, but is again easily re-elected. A good result for Catherine King there.
And the seat of Banks, held by Daryl Mellom until this evening. And
Daryl Mellom's been defeated. He's got 47. He's finished a distant second there and has easily lost that seat. So for the first time in history, David Coleman becomes a Liberal MP for the seat of Banks, the first Liberal MP for the seat. And moving on to Barker, where Patrick Secker is retiring. He's been a member since 1998. He's replaced by Tony Passon, who's the new Liberal member for Barker, very safe Liberal electorate.
And the seat of Barton now, just relinquished by Robert McClellan, moving back to New South Wales.
Well, this one's still in doubt at the end of the night. I haven't had a really close look at the figures recently. Yes, this one's still in doubt. Nicholas Varvaris, who's the mayor of Cogra, is basically neck and neck with Steve McMahon, who's the former mayor of Hurstville. This is where Robert McClellan's retiring, so that seat's too close to call at the end of the night. That one remains in doubt.
The Victorian seat of Batman, held by Martin Ferguson, retiring. Safest Labor seat in Australia. No, Bass, I'm sorry, my error. Bass in Tasmania.
Andrew Nikolic has been easily elected, former paratrooper and 3-decade veteran of the Army. He's been elected and wins the seat of Bass, which is a seat which has a habit of, I think he becomes the sixth out of the last 7 elections where the sitting member has changed.
And now to the seat of Batman, safest Labor seat in Australia.
Yeah, well, it was safest in two-party preferred terms, but the Greens have finished second again at 27%. They've actually increased their votes since last time. And so, what's his name? David Feeney has transferred from the upper house. He's actually increased his majority because the Liberals changed their preference strategy, which flowed to him this time rather than to the Greens. Alex Batal has missed out again for the 4th time.
Staying in Victoria, we move to Bendigo,
where Steve Gibbons has retired. There's been an 8.2% swing against Labor, but at this stage it looks like while the Labor candidate is behind on first preferences, the flow of preferences to her at this stage, there is a national candidate there, but the Green and minor party preferences seem to be flowing more strongly to Labor. And at this stage, with 63 to 71 booths counted, we've got Labor holding on to this seat. Now, there'll be pre-poll votes to come, so there might be a bit more counting, but at this stage it looks like Labor's held Bendigo.
And what about Bennelong, seat that's given us a few surprises over the years?
Yeah, well, it's a 4.5% swing to the Liberal Party. John Alexander returned over Jason Yetsan-Lee, the last-minute announced Labor candidate. Certainly not the 65% that one of the automated polls suggested in the result, but still a comfortable majority for John Alexander.
And how's Philip Ruddock doing in Barara?
He's doing very comfortably. He's got 61% of the first preference vote and has had an increase of about 3% after preferences.
Moving to Queensland and the seat of Blair.
And Labor has retained this with only a small swing against Shane Newman. He's clearly led the first preferences. I'm trying to see whether he's been easily returned. So Shane Newman holds Blair, which is the seat based on Ipswich.
And back to New South Wales and the seat of Blaxland in the southwest suburbs, held by Jason Clare.
Jason Clare's held this seat with no loss in support. He's basically got the same voters at the last election. So Jason Clare comfortably returned for the Labor Party.
And the seat of Bonner is up next, a Queensland seat.
It's retained by Ross Faster. This seat was first contested in 2004 and it hasn't actually ever returned a sitting member. Ross Faster's the first. He was defeated after his first term in Parliament. So Ross Faster's back in Parliament with a small swing to the LNP.
And the South Australian seat of Boothby, held by Andrew Southcott.
Who's substantially increased his majority from a marginal seat. He's gained 6.8% swing to him. So Andrew Southcott is back in Parliament.
And what about the seat of Bowman up next? Andrew Laming's seat?
Andrew Laming's won with a small swing to the Labor Party. It's one of the rare ones we've seen tonight. Darryl Brisky's a former state Labor Party member for the local area, but Andrew Laming's been comfortably returned in that seat, which he's made quite safe in recent years.
Braddon next in Labor's death zone of Tasmania.
And Sid Sidebottom's been defeated there. Sid Sidebottom been defeated, and Brett Whiteley is a former state MP who lost his seat at the last state election, now transfers to federal politics to represent the northwest and west coast of Tasmania.
Now the Liberal-held seat of Bradfield in Sydney.
A very safe Labor electorate, 64.8% there for Paul Fletcher, one of the safest Liberal seats in the country.
Gary Gray's seat of Brand in Western Australia up next.
He's comfortably held this seat with only a small swing to him, in fact, so there's been a slight increase in the Labor vote in Brand.
Brisbane, Teresa Gambaro's Liberal-held seat.
She's retained it with a small swing to her. She's got nearly 50% of the first preference vote, and after preferences that's 53.5.
And Bruce now, Melbourne, Alan Griffin's seat.
He's had a big swing against him, big slice taken out of his majority. Emmanuel Ciccello is the Liberal candidate they're leading on first preferences. He's just ahead, but he'll lose on Green preferences. 6.4% swing, so it's a marginal seat for the first time in a while. That was one of the seats people were naming as being a big swing.
And what about the seat of Clare in New South Wales Central and West?
John Cobb easily re-elected in that electorate in the Central West with 58% of the first preference vote.
The seat of Colwell next, Labor, held by Maria van Vakkermanu.
Hey, Maria van Vakkermanu is easily elected. She got a 5.7% swing against her, but she did hold it with a 20% margin before the election, so she's easily been returned.
And Canberra, Gai Brodman's seat.
She's got a small swing to the Liberal Party, but it's a very safe seat. It leads on first preferences and will win on minor party preferences, Green preferences. We've got her with a 1.4% swing to the Liberal Party, so an easy return for her.
Back to the West now, and the Liberal Party's seat of Canning.
Well, this is where Alana McTiernan, who we'll mention later in relation to Perth, ran last time and actually got a swing to her. Without Alana McTiernan there, the swing in Canning is a big one back to Don Randall, who was greatly assisted by when Julia Gillard announced the date of the election, which was subsequently changed. There was actually no Labor candidate up against Don Randall, so it was a huge advantage for him campaigning in the West.
Now the Queensland Labor seat of Capricornia, a bit of a dicey one this evening.
We've got this as an LNP gain at the end of the night. It's a little hard to know at this stage. Some figures were saying it's not. That Labor is actually, just looking here, Labor is actually after preferences 10 votes ahead, but the trend in the postal and absent votes is likely to favour the LNP, so you'd suspect the LNP has gained that seat.
And how about the seat of Casey, currently held by Tony Smith in Victoria?
Oh, he's had a very comfortable victory there in that seat to the east of Melbourne, and he's easily been returned there.
And the seat of Charlton now?
With significance, this is where the Liberal candidate withdrew and did no further campaigning. So Pat Conroy had a bit of a walkover there, even though his first preference vote was down 9%. He's replaced Greg Combay in this electorate, who's retired. Quite a vote there for Palmer's United candidate, probably something to do with the Liberal candidate having to resign from the contest.
Ed Husick's Western Sydney seat of Chifley.
He's had only a tiny swing against him, 1.2%, so Ed Husick has been easily returned in Chifley.
What about Speaker Anna Burke in Chisholm?
She's had a 4% swing against her, but will still be returned. Her margin was 5.8, the swing's 4%, so John Nguyen leads on first preferences, but green preferences and the count we have put Anna Burke over the line.
Back to Sydney, how's Scott Morrison doing in Cook?
A big swing to him, a 4% increase in the two-party preferred vote, so an easy victory there for Scott Morrison.
Darren Cheeseman now in Corangamite, hyper marginal seat.
Yeah, well, no, he's gone. Sarah Henderson, 48.2% of the vote. It's hard not to mention football, given what happened in Geelong today, but Sarah Henderson, at the second attempt, is elected as the member for Corangamite.
And what about Corio, held by Richard Marles?
Richard Marles has been easily returned, a 5.7% swing to the Liberal Party, but he held the seat quite safely, so Richard Marles is back in Parliament.
The Northern Perth seat of Cowan now?
We've got some more counting to come, but let me see, Cowan is Luke Simpkins has been easily returned in the northern suburbs of Perth.
And Luke Hartsucker in the seat of Cowper, New South Wales North Coast.
Luke Hartsucker has been easily returned, 2.4% swing to him. A seat that was marginal when he first won it is now quite safe again.
How about Sharon Bird's Labor seat of Cunningham?
She had a small swing against her, but comfortably returned in the industrial Illawarra.
And Julie Bishop in Curtin now, Western Australia.
Small swing to her, comfortably returned in this very safe Liberal electorate in the western suburbs of Perth.
Back to Queensland, George Christensen in Dawson.
He's gone to preferences because of the vote there for the minor parties, but after preferences increases his vote by about 5%, and George Christensen's re-elected in Dawson.
Another marginal Labor seat in Victoria, Deakin.
Which is where Mike Simon from the Labor Party has been defeated by Michael Sukkar, who's the new Liberal member for Deakin, recovering a seat which is traditionally a Liberal-held electorate.
Andrew Wilkie next in the seat of Denison.
His vote's been slipping through the night, and at this stage, Andrew Wilkie will be elected there because the Liberal preferences will heavily favour him. He's got 38.3% of the vote, which is 16% up on last time, and he wins easily with a 14% swing after preferences.
Peter Dutton, Shadow Health spokesman, no trouble keeping Dixon this time round.
1.5% swing to him, so he's comfortably returned.
Now the seat of Dobell, formerly held by the former Labor MP Craig Thompson.
Who polled 4% in this contest. Karen McNamara is the new Liberal MP for Dobell with a swing of 5.9% to the Liberal Party.
Now back to Victoria and Bruce Bilson's outer Melbourne seat of Dunkley.
Well, this is he's got a 4.4% swing to him, and he's comfortably returned Bruce Bilson, who's held that seat since 1996.
And Durack now back in the West.
Let me see, I haven't looked at these for a while. This looks like Melissa Price should win this seat. Let me see, I'm having a look here. We've still got a lot more counting to come, but this is a contest between the Liberals and the Nationals. The Nationals' preferences are held by Labor. We've got a preference count. We don't have any booth information, which allows me to do an exact match here. There'll be a bit more counting, but it's looking good for Melissa Price, who recently failed in an attempt to win the state seat of Kalgoorlie.
Eden Monaro now, heartbreakingly, no longer a bellwether seat.
Well, it's come back into the marginal category. I still think Labor will win this seat. They're a considerable way ahead on the preference count, but if you take into account the trend in postals and absence, then it may yet be much closer. But at this stage, I think Mike Kelly's been returned.
What about the LNP seat of Fadden, also in Queensland?
Stuart Roberts easily returned, a very small swing to the Labor Party in that electorate.
And here's a seat that's drawing a lot of attention, seat of Fairfax in Queensland.
Yes, look, I don't know who's won that seat. At the moment, I've got, with some estimated preferences, I've got Clive Palmer just ahead, but I really don't have a preference count, so it's a bit hard to know. At this stage, that's too close to call. Alex Somnier is the retiring member. Whether Ted O'Brien or Clive Palmer wins that seat, we'll have to wait for further counting. We don't have a preference count there.
And what about the seat of Farrer, held by Susan Lee?
Susan Lee's easily returned. She had a very comfortable victory there. You had a very nice dinner with her recently by plane in Western New South Wales, didn't you?
I did.
Shearer's Shed.
And the seat of Fisher, another gripping one in this election. Yeah,
and who's not showing there is Peter Slipper, who polled 1.4% of the vote. Mal Brough will win that seat. There was a slight possibility that Bill Schock could have pulled into second place there, but I don't think so now. So Mal Brough will be returning to the Parliament.
Okay, Greg Hunt's seat in Melbourne of Flinders.
Easily returned a 2.9% swing to him in that electorate.
What about the Central Queensland seat of Flynn now?
A 3% swing to the LNP, so Ken O'Dowd has been returned in that electorate. Chris Trevor, the former Labor member for the seat, ran again but didn't win election.
And Ford now, the Queensland electorate targeted by Peter Beattie.
It didn't do that well. There was a 2.5% swing to the LNP, and Bert Van Manen has been easily re-elected in Ford.
And Forrest now, held by Nola Marino.
And easily re-elected with a 3.3% swing to her.
How about Fowler, held by Chris Hayes?
63% of the first preference vote. They're a very safe Labor electorate. A 9.66, a big swing to the Labor Party. It's the first time I've seen that all night. That's quite a dramatic swing to the Labor Party, maybe. But I will say here, there's 14% informal vote, which is one of the highest in the country.
Wow.
Maybe Labor had a particularly bad result last time, which they did. But that's a swing which is completely at odds with everything else in the district.
Now, the seat of Franklin, back in Tasmania. How's Julie Collins doing there?
Actually, there was something... Franklin, yes. This is a 6.1% swing to the Liberal Party, but Julie Collins has held the seat with a stronger margin than that, and she'll be returned as the member for Franklin. She may be the only Labor member from the lower house in Tasmania after this election.
The Canberra seat of Fraser next, held by Andrew Lee.
He's been re-elected with a very small swing to the Liberal Party.
Back in the west, we go to Fremantle, held by Melissa Park.
A swing of about 2% to the Liberal Party, and Melissa Park has easily been elected there.
How about Nicola Roxon's old seat of Gellibrand in Victoria?
There's a big swing to the Liberal Party, but Tim Watts is still elected as the new member for Gellibrand, replacing Nicola Roxon.
Gilmore now, New South Wales South Coast.
This is where Joanna Gash is retiring after being a very popular member for a long time. There's been a 2.4% swing to the Labor Party, so there's some of Joanna Gash's personal support. But Anne, I think it's Sudmalis is the new member for that electorate.
What about the National Party-held seat of Gippsland?
Very safe victory for Darren Chester, very comfortable re-election there with a 4% swing to him.
Andrew Robb returned in Goldstein, I imagine?
4.6% swing to the Liberal Party. It's a very safe Liberal electorate and continues to be.
How about Brendan O'Connor's seat of Gorton in Melbourne?
Big swing against him, about 8% after preferences, but he's still got over 50% of the first preference vote. It's a very safe seat for Labor.
Lots of attention to Grayndler this evening, maybe the home of the next Labor leader.
Well, Anthony Albanese has easily won that electorate. The Greens have slipped to third place, and their preferences help Anthony Albanese. Even if the Greens had finished in second place, they would have Liberal preferences would have helped Anthony Albanese. So his vote's been maintained. The Green vote's down 3.5% there with Hall Greenland as the Green candidate.
And the Western Suburbs Sydney seat of Greenway, a surprise hold for Labor?
3% swing to the Labor Party, and Michelle Rowland comfortably returned as the member for Greenway.
The large South Australian seat of Grey is next.
And Rowan Ramsey yet again increases his margin in that very safe Liberal electorate.
And despite all the predictions that Kevin Rudd would lose his Brisbane seat of Griffith, came to naught.
He's halved his majority and he has to come from slightly behind on preferences, but Kevin Rudd will hold the seat of Griffith.
How about the seat of Groom?
Very comfortably retained by Ian McFarlane for the LNP.
And the Perth seat of Hasluck?
Ken Wyatt's returned. The Parliament, the House of Representatives' first Indigenous member, has been easily returned in Hasluck.
Seat of Herbert next, Townsville-based.
Ewan Jones has been returned with a 3% swing to the LNP.
Kelly O'Dwyer's seat of Higgins.
5% swing to the Liberal Party in Higgins, and Kelly O'Dwyer has been returned there. Big vote there for the Greens.
And in South Australia, what's the fate of Steve Georgianis?
Steve Georgianis has been defeated. There's a swing of nearly 8%, which means that Matt Williams is the new Liberal MP for Hindmarsh.
And Paul Neville has just retired from the seat of Hinkler. How's it fared?
Keith Pitt will be the new member there. There was some interest in Rob Messenger, the Palmer United candidate, who had been a former state MP, but he hasn't polled well enough to get ahead of Labor, so Keith Pitt will be the new member for Hinkler, replacing the long-serving Paul Neville.
Anthony Burns' Melbourne seat of Holt up next.
4% swing, so it's a very comfortable return for Anthony Byrne. This is an electorate down in the outer southeast of Melbourne.
And Simon Crean's old seat of Hotham up for grabs this election.
6% swing to Labor, but Claire O'Neill is the new Labor member for Hotham.
And the seat of Hughes is up next.
Yeah, Craig Kelly's doubled his majority. Alison McGarity, a former local state MP, came out of retirement to contest that seat, but there was never a chance that Labor was going to come close to winning that seat.
The rural seat of Hume, held by Albie Schultz, who's retiring at this election.
And an interesting arrival there in Angus Taylor, who's very well known in agricultural and financial industries, and is a Rhodes Scholar and is expected to go a long way in the Liberal Party.
Labor Minister Joel Fitzgibbon's Hunter seat of Hunter.
Well, there's been a substantial swing here. It's become a marginal seat from 12.5 to 3.5 after preferences. We've got an 8.9% swing. The preferences of the minor parties have gone a long way to helping the Nationals there, but Joel Fitzgibbon will still be returned.
And how do things look at the end of the night for Sophie Mirabella in Indi?
I think Sophie Mirabella will be re-elected, is my view on those numbers. I don't think there'll be enough leakage from the minor parties for Sophie Mirabella to hold on to that seat. I think a vote needed to be down around 41% before she was in real trouble. We will have to wait for some more pre-poll voting, but on my numbers, I think that looks like Sophie Mirabella will be returned.
What about Mark Dreyfus in Isaacs?
He's had a big swing against him of about 6%, but he will still be returned as a member for Isaacs, the current Attorney General, soon to be ex-Attorney General.
And next, Jenny Macklin's seat of Jagga Jagga.
She's had a big swing against her, and she's going to have to come from behind on preferences, from Green preferences, but she's still returned as the member for Jagga Jagga.
Okay, Kennedy. Bob Katter has had a slightly disappointing night on the whole.
Yes, he's coming from a long way behind on preferences this time, but he will still be returned. The preference counts we've got indicate that Bob Katter will still win the seat.
Kingsford Smith now being deserted by Peter Garrett. Desert's probably too tough a word.
Only a 1.4% swing to the Liberal Party. Matt Thistlethwaite put a lot of effort into campaigning. He's led on first preferences, gets the assistance of Green preferences. So Michael Finelli at the second attempt has been unable to get through. And the former state Liberal MP who rang me this week and gave me this as a hot tip for the Liberals to win and the reaction they were getting on the doorstep. Yes, I'm not listening to you again.
Okay, consider him warned.
I'll hear back from that.
Going back to South Australia now in the seat of Kingston, held by Amanda Rishworth.
And she's comfortably held at a 5% swing against her. This is quite remarkable, given only 3 elections ago this was one of the ultra-marginal seats of South Australia.
What about the Melbourne seat of Kooyong? Still a Liberal jewel?
Still a Liberal jewel. And they'll be Josh Frydenberg will be very happy with that result.
Now, Latrobe, another seat that's changed hands tonight in Melbourne.
It brings the return of Jason Wood and the genetically modified orgasm. If you remember Jason Wood, previously he's a former member for the seat, and he's won the seat back after being defeated in 2010.
Yes, I remember that very clearly. Now, the seat of Lawler, newly vacated by the former Prime Minister, or the last former Prime Minister but one, Julia Gillard's seat. What's happened there? She's
retired, and Joanne Ryan is the new Labor member for Lawler. It's had a 10% swing against the Labor Party, but that's still Joanne Ryan is the new Labor member for the seat.
What about the Cairns and Cape York seat of Leichhardt?
Warren Inch has increased his vote slightly, a significant vote there for Palmer's United Party candidate again, but Warren Inch has easily returned.
Good result tonight for former Treasurer Wayne Swan in Lilley.
Yes, he's not a feather duster yet, Mr Swan. He's back into the Parliament. He leads on the first preferences, and we're estimating there's only a 1% swing against him. His margin was 3%, so Wayne Swan's back in Parliament. And the most senior Labor minister defeated tonight was in Lindsay. Yes, the swing was 3.2% after preferences. So some of the mega swings that were being talked about in Western Sydney just didn't happen. Now to the Northern Territory now, a fascinating seat, Lingiari. What's happening to Warren Snowden there? It's too close to call. We've got a preference count in 44 booths, and it's down to under 0.5%. So we don't know the result in Lingiari tonight, and we won't. It's an incredibly, well, it's one of the largest in the country. It goes from everything from remote communities to Christmas Island, so it's quite a different electorate. And the seat of Longman, held by Wyatt Roy. And he's got a nice 4.6% swing to him, and Wyatt Roy's easily returned as a Member of Parliament. So what's happened in Rob Oakeshott's old seat of Lyne tonight? David Gillespie, Dr. David Gillespie, who's a gastroenterologist and director of physician training at Port Macquarie Base Hospital, has won at the second attempt.
Stephen Smith said it would take a lot to get Dick Adams out of the seat of Lyons in Tasmania, but it looks like that's happened.
It looks like enough leverage has been applied, and at this stage he's more than 400 votes behind on the count we've got, and we're estimating that the swing's 14%, his margin was 12.3. So Dick Adams, now Gil Duthie lost the seat in 1975, and that's the only other member who's been defeated in Lyons since 1946. So they don't change the members in Lyons very often, so they must have had good reason for it.
The Outer Sydney Liberal seat of Macarthur next.
An 8.5% swing to the Liberal Party. This is a seat that tends to go backwards and forwards a bit with redistributions, but Russell Matheson won it for the first time at the last election and has easily increased his majority.
The seat of Mackellar, home of Bronwyn Bishop.
Yes, well, she's been easily returned as the member for Mackellar.
What about the Blue Mountains seat of Macquarie?
There was talk early in the campaign that Labor could win this seat. The swing has in fact been to the Liberal Party. 2.7% swing to the Liberal Party, and Louise Marcus has easily won the seat.
Back to Adelaide, and in the north we have the seat of Macon.
6.5% swing to the Liberal Party, but Tony Zappia has been returned.
Now, part of the Liberal National feud has been about the seat of Mallee in northwest Victoria.
And on my estimates, the Nationals will win. Yeah, the Nationals will win that seat. That it's we're getting a two-party preferred count from the Electoral Commission between National and Labor, which it isn't on the night. But Labor's preferences are directed to the Liberals, but they will leak heavily to the Nationals. And Andrew Broad will replace John Forrest as the new National member for Mallee.
What about the Queensland seat of Maranoa, Barnaby Joyce's first choice?
I haven't had a chance to look at this, but there's an important name there at number 3, John Bjelke-Petersen, trying for Palmer's United Party, but he's finished third. And Bruce Scott, the gentleman farmer, is easily returned in Maranoa.
And we know from talking to Bill Shorten what happened in the seat of Maribyrnong this evening.
Swing of about 5%, so he's been easily returned there.
The seat of Mayo in South Australia, home to Jamie Briggs.
And he's increased his margin by 5%, so Jamie Briggs is easily returned.
And Rob Mitchell, Labor member for McEwen. What's happened to him?
Look, at the moment we've got him ahead. It's still in doubt. We're not definitely giving that away, but he's on 50.6 of the actual count and 50.4 on a projected count. So at this stage, it's too close to call. But as they say in the classics, it's always better to be ahead than behind.
A lot of attention paid to the seat of McMahon tonight, home of Chris Bowen, Treasurer until recently.
Yes, and it's been quite an active campaign with both sides attacking each other. Personal records, Chris Bowen and Ray King, the Liberal candidate. But in the end, it swings 4.2%. The margin was 7.8%, and Chris Bowen's been returned as the member for McMahon.
What about Russell Broadbent's seat of Macmillan in eastern Victoria?
Look, Russell Broadbent had several guys getting into Parliament and got elected and then would be tossed out the next time. I think it happened 2 or 3 times. Then he finally won Macmillan again. And ever since then, he's just increased his margin. He's got up another 7.6% this time. So Russell Broadbent, he will hold that seat until he retires.
Gold Coast next, and the LNP held seat of McPherson.
And Karen Andrews has increased her majority in that safe Gold Coast seat.
Melbourne next, battleground between Labor and the Greens.
And the Greens have won here because basically they got their vote up above 42%, which is what they needed to do to overcome the Liberal preference change. So Adam Bansiman easily returned. There's very little swing to the Labor Party after preferences, so that increase in Green vote, in Green first preference vote, has offset the decrease in preferences from the Liberal Party.
And what about Melbourne Ports, held for some time by Michael Danby for Labor?
And he continues to hold it. He's leading on, let me look at this. Yes, he continues to hold it. He's quite a long way behind on first preferences, but there's a huge vote there for the Green candidate and Birrell. And after the counting of preferences, then Michael Danby wins easily. It's a seat Labor always seems to win from second place.
Former Minister and Minister-to-be, Kevin Andrews in Menzies next.
It's got a 5.7% swing to him and comfortably returned in that leafy part of eastern Melbourne.
What about the seat of Moncrieff? Steve Chobo is up next.
Mitchell.
No, I'm sorry, we've missed one.
Mitchell, Alex Hawke is a very safe seat in Sydney's northwest, and Alex Hawke, has easily retained Mitchell.
Moncrieff now with Steve Chobo, the Northern Gold Coast seat.
And he's been comfortably returned in another, the Gold Coast seats are very safe for the LNP.
Moore is up next. It's another Perth seat held by Dr. Mal Washer.
And Ian Goodenough is the new member the Goodenough new member for Moore. And he replaces Mal Washer in this safe Northern Perth seat for the Liberal Party.
Seat of Moreton next, held by Labor's Graham Perrott by a very slender margin.
Well, he's increased his margin. He started out with 1.1, he finishes with 2.7, so it's for Graham Perrott a terrific result. He's behind on first preferences, but he gets there after the distribution of preferences, so he survived the government.
Former Howard Government Minister Sharman Stone in Murray.
She's increased the majority in this very safe northern Victorian rural seat.
And the seat of New England now. We've been there once tonight. Just remind us what happened.
Well, Barnaby Joyce and his killer canaries have swamped it in New England, so well done to Barnaby Joyce there.
And the seat of Newcastle, held by Sharon Grierson, another Hunter region seat.
And Sharon, trying to get my computer has stopped on me. Sharon Grierson has retired. The new Labor member is Sharon Claydon, who's replaced her as the new Labor candidate. She's had a swing of 3.5% against her, but has held on to the seat.
And has Australia's new Treasurer held on to the seat of North Sydney?
Has hell frozen over yet? No, of course he's held on to North Sydney. He's got a 1.6% swing to him.
Now, what's happening in O'Connor?
Well, the Nationals have retained it by the look of it. The preference count we're getting indicates, no, look, it's too early to call. Rick Wilson's 39, the Nationals 27, the Labor Party 15. No, we can't call that one yet at this stage. The modelling points towards the Nationals holding it, but I'd really want to know what the real count is rather than the there's 133 polling places and we've only got 45 preference counts. There's a lot more counting to come in that seat.
Look forward to it. Seat of Oxley next, Bernie Ripoll's seat he holds for Labor.
Bernie Ripoll, yes, he's won that seat. I'm just looking down the list here. The DLP candidate, Frank Carg, got 1.3%. He gave me a very long phone call in the election campaign explaining why he was going to win that seat. But Bernie Ripoll, 43.6%, has won that seat, retained that seat.
Anyone else who wants to call Anthony, please go ahead. The seat of Page next. Janelle Saffin has held it.
Yeah, and she's been defeated. She did well to increase her margin last time, but this is a seat which has gone with government at every election since 1990, and this continues to be the trend. If Labor holds Eden Monaro, then Page and Lindsay will be the new bellwethers.
Back to New South Wales, and the seat is Parkes, held by Mark Coulton of the National Party.
And he very easily retains it.
Parramatta was figured to be a possible Lib gain tonight.
And Julie Owens has retained it, which is a 3.6% swing to the Liberal Party. Again, the swings are more 3 to 4%, not the 7 to 8s that people were reporting before the election.
Also in the Hunter, Bob Baldwin in the seat of Patterson. How's he done this evening?
Bob Baldwin was in and out of Parliament there for a while, and Patterson was marginal, but he's got the two-party preferred margin up above 10% at this election, so that's a good win for Bob Baldwin.
Former Howard Minister Judy Moylan is retiring from the Perth seat of Pearce.
And in comes Christian Porter, the former WA Treasurer, who's quite ambitious and is a potential future minister in an Abbott government, but he's transferred from state politics. He passed up on potentially becoming the next Premier of Western Australia and has moved to federal politics.
Speaking of transferring from state politics, let's have a look at the seat of Perth, vacated by Stephen Smith.
And Alana McTiernan, a former state minister, very popular, local former minister and mayor of the Vincent Council in the local area. She's easily retained Stephen Smith's seat with only a small 1% swing against her.
What about the northern Brisbane seat of Petrie now, hitherto held by Labor MP Yvette D'Arth?
Well, earlier in the night we were talking about there being no LNP gains in Queensland. It now looks like Petrie has gone and joined Capricornia. So it looks like there are 2 LNP gains in Queensland, but still that's many fewer than was expected, and so Yvette D'Arth is out and Luke Howarth looks like being the new LNP member for Petrie.
Back to Adelaide, and Labor would have to be doing very grimly indeed to lose Port Adelaide, held by Minister Mark Butler.
And they're certainly not doing that grimly. There's still a 7.6% swing, but this is Labor's safest seat in South Australia.
What about Craig Emerson's old seat of Rankin in the Brisbane South?
Well, Jim Chalmers, who's Wayne Swan's former Chief of Staff, has won that seat. He's had a very small swing to him, so there's another one of those seats in Brisbane that everyone was talking about being a wipeout, and actually Labor's increased their majority. Wipeout, isn't that somong you used to keep singing, Mr. Emerson?
I think that's the one. Back in Sydney's West now, and Labor's John Murphy in Reid hasn't had a great night.
Well, I'd written him off earlier, and he's right back in doubt. Let me see, at the end of the night, he's about 600 votes behind on the trend on postals last time. That would get him back to 50-50. I suspect he may not do quite as well on postals and pre-polls this time, but still.
Nevertheless, back in the hunt.
Yeah.
The seat of Richmond now on the New South Wales North Coast, held by Justine Elliott.
Small swing to the National Party, but Justine Elliott's been easily returned in Richmond.
Let's go to Riverina in rural New South Wales.
Michael McCormack's easily returned as the member for Riverina. He won it last time and has been easily re-elected this time. He didn't have a Liberal opponent at this election.
Back to a very, very marginal New South Wales seat, Central Coast seat of Robertson.
And this has been won by Lucy Wicks, the new Liberal candidate in that electorate, so that's a safe win for the Liberal Party there.
What about Ryan, going back to Brisbane now?
This is Jane Prentice. She's been easily returned. This is in the leafy part of Western Brisbane, and she's been easily returned in that electorate.
And the former Speaker Harry Jenkins' seat of Scullin.
6.6% swing to the Liberal Party, but Andrew Giles is the new Labor member for Scullin, replacing Harry Jenkins.
How about the seat of Shortland now, held by Labor's Jill Hall?
Well, her margin's been halved, but she's still comfortably returned in that seat up in the Lower Hunter.
Solomon in the Northern Territory.
It looks like Natasha Griggs has retained that for the CLP. There's been a swing to the Labor Party of 0.7, but in the end she retains that seat.
And back to Perth for the seat of Stirling, held by Liberal MP Michael Keenan.
Michael Keenan's been easily returned there with a 4% swing to the Liberal Party.
How about the seat of Swan now?
We've got Sturt first. We can't overlook Christopher Pyne.
Sorry, he would be appalled, and
yes.
Because no one calls him sexy either.
You can be nice and say he has sex appeal, and you'll forget the fact you overlooked his election, I'm sure.
I will endorse your statement to that effect, Anthony.
I was agreeing with you.
Anyway, did he win?
He's won, yes. He's got a 6% swing to him, so well done, Christopher.
OK, now Swan. Steve Irons in Perth.
He's had a 3.6% swing to him and easily returned in this electorate.
And Tanya Plibersek, our guest tonight in Sydney. How's she doing?
2.2% swing to the Liberal Party. Tanya Plibersek defeating the Liberal candidate Sean O'Connor in that electorate. The Greens getting about 17%, but if the Greens are in third place, this is a safe Labor seat and Tanya Plibersek's been returned.
The Liberal MP Dennis Jensen's seat of Tangney next in Perth.
Dennis Jensen tends to have more trouble winning pre-selection in the Liberal Party than actually winning the seat. He's had a few run-ins with his local branches, but this is a very safe Liberal electorate and he's been returned easily.
Stephen Jones holds the seat of Throsby.
Just like a note there that Gary Anderson, Angry Anderson, finished third there with 10%. The Nationals giving him that seat a run. But Stephen Jones has been easily returned in that electorate. He's had a 4% swing against him.
You can't call him Gary, it makes him cross. We need to go to Wakefield now, north of Adelaide, held by Labor's Nick Champion.
And he's had a 7.4% swing against him, which puts the seat back into the marginal category, but he's been comfortably returned in that seat.
Seat of Wannon now. Dan Tien has held it for 3 years now, yeah.
Well, he's been comfortably returned, but roughly doubled his majority. So this Western District seat stays with the Liberal Party.
And what sort of a swing did Tony Abbott achieve in his seat of Warringah?
2.2% swing to him. It's a pretty safe seat already, so there's only so far you can take a seat in one direction.
Watson next, held by former Minister Tony Burke.
He's had only a small swing against him. He's been re-elected comfortably, 1.4% swing to the Liberal Party, but Tony Burke's got over 50% of the first preferences.
Now, we know that Malcolm Turnbull's retained Wentworth because he told us.
Yeah, he got a small swing to him. He did quite well. So well done, Malcolm.
And the seat of Werriwa, held by Laurie Ferguson. What's happened there tonight?
No, this is one we were all interested in at one point, but it never popped up on our screen, and that's because it was never in danger with the results. He's been re-elected a 4.3% swing against him, so it only leaves him with a buffer of 2.5%, but still Laurie Ferguson returned there over Kent Johns, the Mayor of Sutherland.
National Party leader Warren Truss's seat of Wide Bay in Queensland.
He's got that one trussed up, 2.7% swing to Labor, but he's still got a buffer of over 13%.
OK, and the seat of Wills now.
Kelvin Thompson elected, a small swing to the Liberal Party. Again, the Green vote has increased there. The Green vote has increased in all the inner cities, inner parts of Melbourne. The Green result has been much better in Victoria than it was in either in New South Wales or Queensland.
And we conclude with a safe LNP seat in Queensland, right.
And the one we always have to, what's his name? Scott Buckholz has been re-elected for the second term as the member for Right. So that concludes our run through the seats.
Very nicely done. Thank you, Anthony.
And
yes, well, we'll start off by